This is being recorded to the cloud. It is week 9 of our R795 dissertation proposal preparation. And for some of you, qualifying exams as well. So it's a double whammy this semester. We don't want to put you into all sorts of stress mode. So tonight, we'll calm it down a bit and hear from someone who's going to present her take on doing a literature review and asking good research questions. Excellent research questions. I had the pleasure of grading your projects, I think task 3 last week. Everyone's keeping up pretty well. It might have been task 4 by now. I think it was task 3. And I think we get a little break here because we're not going to meet next week at this time. I mistakenly sent out a kind of a itinerary or agenda for the next 5 weeks. And I said 7 o'clock start, but it's 6 o'clock, as you all know. So we're going to have a couple of people who graduated recently come in 2 weeks. Charan Wong, who Merve knows quite well because we had dinner with her on Friday night. Or was it Saturday night? It was Friday night, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And then Marie Ag, who just defended her dissertation this summer and completed it and is now Dr. Ag. So the two of them. And we'll also hear from Tiffany Roman and Susie Gronseth, alums of the program. They'll talk about their writing space that they utilize and their writing tips. And then I'll give some writing tips along with Maina Ju, who Merve knows quite well as well. Week 14 will be a consultation 1-to-1, and week 15 will be a sharing with each other of the projects that you've completed so far. So that's kind of the lowdown and where we're headed with all this. I probably will want to go right into Merve and have her present, but given that so many people are here, I'm wondering if anyone has a question that is pressing that they want to have addressed before we get started. Does anyone have a comment, concern, question, suggestion? If not, no questions, comments, suggestions? Okay, well, Merve Basdogan's been at IU for 1 year and 3 months since she graduated in July of 2021. And she was working UITS for about a little over a year, the past year. Actually, she worked for a few years and finished that at the end of September. And starting in October, she officially started in the School of Public Health at IU. And so I know Shannon's involved in the medical school, not the School of Public Health, right, Shannon?
Right.
Okay.
But we actually do have quite a few. I'm in family medicine, so we actually have quite a few of our family medicine doctors that also have MPHs, because public health and family medicine, they kind of go hand in hand.
They do. And I think Ben might be involved in the medical field as well and probably works with public health people as well. So Merve's been working with UITS in looking at classroom space and was a guest in my other class a few weeks ago where she went through some of her research and now is helping people in the School of Public Health set their courses up online and think about innovative pedagogy, assessment, evaluation, and so forth. But I've asked her last year when I taught this course to speak on setting up a good literature review and also research questions, and she did such an excellent job, I invited her back. Merve has an undergraduate degree in the computers and education space in Turkey, and then a master's after that in the IST field, and then now a doctorate in IST. So she's seen the evolution of technology over the past decade, and she's seen a lot of interesting research questions that have been posed. And I shared her slides with all of you as a PDF earlier today. At the end of this talk, we'll do Q&A, and then she's going to talk a little bit about survey tools, because Aishat asked if we could have someone talk about survey tools way back on week 1. And I didn't forget you, Aishat. And so Merve has a chapter on survey tools. Aishat?
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. She's the expert. You know, as I said earlier, I developed a survey tool kind of like SurveyMonkey, but was a year too late. Or if I was a year earlier, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be a vice president for Microsoft, like one of my friends. Merve, would you like to take over? And maybe I need to give you host privileges or something.
Thank you, Dr. Bonk. I think I can share my screen.
Cool.
And
You're a
I'm
co-host
already-
anyways. You and Cindy will be co-hosts. So.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Let me very quickly set up my.
Oh, I know what I was going to get on the record before you started. Last week, I said bad things about ETR&D. I have to rescind those comments. I have to take them all back because they accepted a paper of mine yesterday, and a paper that Merve and I have. They kind of had minor revisions. We have to do minor, modest. So 2 papers they got back to me after we waited 10 months, and both of them they got back within 2 minutes of each other. So, and I'm also getting an award at ACT from ETR&D for distinguished development of my podcast show. So I think ETR&D is a great journal. #1 in the field. Is fabulous. Don't listen to anything I said last week. But I was being honest, really. Sometimes it can take long. As Merve knows, it can be frustrating. And then all of a sudden you get stuff back and they want you to turn it around as quick as possible and get it in so that they can publish it. You know, you wait and wait and wait and wait. So one of mine, we got revised. I was up till 3:30 this morning talking to folks from Cairo, American University of Cairo, that want me to bring me there. I tried to sleep, I couldn't sleep, got up at 4:30 and revised, did the minor revisions until like 5:15 and then went to bed. So if I'm kind of loopy today, it's because I really didn't get much sleep last night. But I am thankful ETR&D did review things, and I do pay homage to them right now. Merve, I'm sorry, I had to get that on the record.
Hi again, everyone. Tonight, I would like to talk about 10 tips on literature review and forming effective research questions. Dr. Bonk has already introduced me a little bit about me. As he said, I have a PhD in the Instructional Systems Technology with a minor in Educational Psychology. Recently, I completed my postdoctoral degree at Indiana University's Learning Space and Music Initiative. And currently, I am working as an instructional designer and multimedia specialist at School of Public Health. I would like to start my presentation with this metaphor, and I love it a lot I remember this chain of reasoning from the research methodology course from the beginning introduction unit. So it is a very good way to explain how a research proposal is very multi-layered process, and you should plan very carefully each sub-steps to have a very strong research or research proposal. I mean, at the end, you have to clearly explain where your study idea is originated and what kind of philosophical, theoretical camp is supporting your purpose or ideas. And after these 2 steps, you have to narrow it down, narrow your focus, and formulate good research questions. And today, based on my experiences in the academia, as well as other researchers' publications about how to do a literature review part, as well as write effective questions, I prepared this presentation. So first of all, let's start with what is a literature review for a dissertation. So it is a good domain space in which you can explain your ideas, the concepts, the operational definitions, the models that you are going to use, and as well as you can talk about the historical or current divergent ideas, controversies about that idea. And also you can show your skills to synthesize what is happening and how you can synthesize those empirical research in a way that you can convince your dissertation committee and readers there are some gaps and you are trying to make a contribution to fill these gaps possibly. So let's start with the first one then. After defining what is literature, what is not a literature review? Actually, literature reviews are not annotated bibliographies. So you cannot just summarize single individual studies and bring them together without having a purpose. You should, first of all, keep that information in your mind. Annotated bibliographies are so helpful, but a step before the real writing process. So as well as it is also not a opinion piece, an argumentative essay. You should be objective. In the following slides, I'm going to talk about the significance of keeping your voice, but at the same time, you have to use effectively the theory in the field, the methodology, how it was studied, and what are the gaps in an objective way. So let's move to the second one then. Be a purposeful reader. So when you start your first search in library resources or Google Scholar, you will feel so lost or drawn to millions of resources. I mean, when you search for online learning, you will see a lot of publications in the area. So you have a limited time. For this reason, you should be a purposeful reader. Let's say if it is an empirical paper, have a habit of just looking at their abstract first before moving to the second stage. Or if it is a book or ebook, looking their table of contents will help you a lot to gain time. So the depth and breadth of knowledge is so important to find your specific focus expertise. And as I mentioned earlier, the objectivity in this purposeful reading habit, even if you find, and you will definitely find some studies that will challenge your position, your purpose, you should still have to mention them as well for a balanced literature review part. The third one is evaluate your own reading. So let's say you pass the first step, second step, but still you have to have a very critical eye about your notes, your organizations. You should ask about who are the authors? Do they have some authority in their specific knowledge area? What are the validity of the resources, the tools they have used? If they are accurate, do they mention or address their objectivity in their paper, or to what extent it is current? And sometimes location is even very important. I mean, let's say you are writing a paper about Turkish context and you are not citing any paper written in that context. It is some kind of controversial. You can get critics about it. So it should be relevant. And the coverage, what are their sample sizes, how they produce those findings, generalizations. So you should be your own reviewer, evaluator, and you have to do it iteratively, more than one time. And taking notes are so important to facilitate your entire writing process. As reading your papers, the literature, try to make some notes about the key issues, some concepts, the author's stated purposes, their own conclusions, and also if there are so very important quotes, try to make their note their page numbers. It will help you a lot at the end. For this purpose, first of all, let me explain. In my dissertation, I analyzed 191 dissertations. So it was very difficult to manage and organize those vast amount of resources. So Mendeley helped me a lot to manage entire process, and it is free. So I don't know if you are familiar, some of you might know Zotero as well, but in Mendeley, you can take notes, put sticky notes, as well as you can, after you came back again to your notes, you will see without opening them PDF, you can see your notes on the right-hand side. So it will help you a lot to, especially in the writing process and the organization process, to be more efficient. So I highly recommend using that tool. It is free, it is the good side. And also the next tip, be up to date, but do not forget older studies. Usually, I mean, again, let's say distance education, you want to follow all studies, but it might be very difficult to keep up with all the journals, publications. So usually creating Google Alerts is a very efficient way. You can get notifications, Google Alerts, emails once somebody published something on a specific topic that you will specify. Also, explore and use your library resources effectively. Have a habit of using those Boolean search keywords like and or not. They will facilitate your search process a lot to filter and to narrow down your focus. One of the important suggestions I can give you. And keep your own voice. From the beginning, as I already mentioned, it is a place you synthesize other empirical studies, but still the reader, it is your paper, your research, and the readers will look for your own voice, and it should be front and center. For this reason, and to do that, you can get help from other scholars in the field, but you should still make visible your own purpose, because you are the owner of that study. This the direct quotations it might be a little bit controversial, but usually it is suggested. If it is not so vital, do not use direct quotations a lot, especially in your introduction literature. Or if you have to use it, try to make it more shorter. And also for the indirect voice, I know we are already doing the paraphrasing their ideas is important, but at the same time, you should make them clear. I mean, which part is somebody else's voice, which part belongs to you. Let me show you an example. This is from a library resource from University of Australia's Writing Center. Look at this example, let's together. The current diversity of student population poses a great challenge to universities. The red part is the writer's voice. You made your introduction, and then you synthesize other voices for the rest of them. Gamachi, Haggis, Pojet, their synthesized voice. And the blue one, this approach is referred to as float-on, another voice, and you conclude it with your own voice. This is a very good balance method to bring together synthesis, other and your voice, and will make your writing more strong. Sometimes I see such paragraphs, a very long paragraph, and a lot of writers listed at the end, but it also includes your voice as well, and it is kind of misleading, falsification kind of problems. So it is recommended be clear who says what. Otherwise, it is another academic dishonest example, and I'm going to show other examples later.
Merve, can you go back to that point?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a comment on number 6. So be careful with this one, and it's a common mistake of all students and IST students. I see it in a number of dissertations. If you had a rule of thumb, I would say if you're reading page 10 to 20 of a dissertation, and there's more than 5 direct quotes in those 10 pages, yeah, if there's more, it's probably too many. So I would say if you have in a sequence, maybe 10 or 20 page sequence, if you have let's say a quote for every 2 pages, that's okay. More than that, it'd be too much. Even a quote every 2 pages is probably too much. So I had a student a few years ago that was getting near the end of her clock time. She almost ran out of time. and she did her dissertation rather fast at the end, a very similar dissertation to you was. And she quote in her proposal or in her final dissertation, she had quotes to everybody. Every paragraph was a quote. And it wasn't because she didn't know the material. It wasn't because she couldn't explain it. It was because of more of an Eastern Asia culture, because she was from China, paying respect to the scholars in the field and not wanting to misrepresent them. And I had her change most of the quotes into her own words, and she wrote beautiful prose. But when you read her dissertation, you had no sense that she knew what she was talking about. You just thought that she was, not plagiarizing, but not submitting her own unique work. And, that because she had so many quotes, we had lower expectations of her because we saw so many quotes. So while you may think including a quote will make you sound smarter, in some ways, if you have too many quotes, it makes you sound dumber, because the committee's not going to put any faith in what you have to say, because all you've done is grab some literature off the shelf and just put a bunch of quotes and from different people and put an intro and ending sentence in the paragraph. And that's happened too. I've seen that extreme. In this case, it was not the problem at all. She knew everything. When we questioned her, she had brilliant answers on each one of the comments that the quote unquote expert had made. And when she rewrote the dissertation, it was beautiful prose as well. So it was just a mindset of, kind of a Confucianist mindset of respecting the elders, the teachers, and so forth, and not wanting to touch their language out of respect, as opposed to stealing something. So there can be differences in terms of why one puts a quote in, as my point. There could be social cultural ones, as well as really just wanting to have prose that depicts what the status of the field is at a particular point in time. I'm not sure if you all caught that point. Merve, do you want to add to my point at all on that?
Dr. Bonk, thanks for sharing this anecdote. I totally agree. We shouldn't overuse direct quotes, otherwise it convey a message that we don't confident about our own writing. And at the end, this is our intellectual piece. We should do something than the other voices, and it is our responsibility to balance those voices.
Yeah, there you go. It's your intellectual piece, not the other people who've created the field. It is your piece. And also, when you end your dissertation, don't end with a quote to someone else, because then it seems like their piece. I have a student, this actually last week, who put a quote to someone else, he sent his dissertation to us. He's not defended yet. And he ended with a quote to someone else. And I said, no. Please don't end with a quote to someone else. And make sure your ending is not wimpy. I don't know how else to put it. Most students run out of steam when they get to the last chapter. And the last chapter, you can stand on a soapbox and say something. You've been working on it for a year. You can actually say something substantive. So do so, say something far reaching, a little, maybe even go beyond your data. And that's okay. We can always delete that if we don't like it. But, just don't go for a real kind of wimpy kind of ending. Make a point, but don't make someone else's point for them. Go ahead, Merve. I'm sorry to interrupt twice now.
So we are going to avoid using direct quotes, and we can paraphrase, and we should be very careful about paraphrasing as well. Usually we are so familiar with the plagiarism. We fill out tutorials from college or even in the grad school. However, there are other ways of academic dishonest examples, and you can be very troubled even if you don't have a bad intention. For instance, if you are paraphrasing somebody in a way actually they didn't mean and you just misunderstood, it's called like nepotism or sometimes falsification. or you can just make some speculations, again, without having any bad intentions, fabrication, sloppiness. These are the other examples as well. So make sure that you get the message of the authors, and if you are not sure, do not include in your paper. Otherwise, you can be a nepotist. I don't know if it is pronounced it correctly, Dr. Bonk.
Yeah, nepotism. And I do like this slide, the terminology here. Thank you for that. This is really, it's got me thinking. So I appreciate what you have here.
Thank you. Then finding a logical structure is important. So let's say you scan the literature, you made your notes, brought together the relevant pieces. So how should you present them? Sometimes you can look at similarities and differences, who agrees and who has some divergent ideas. What are the major unanswered questions and what might be the possible direction? If you can look for these 4 questions and represent in your writing, it will be a very good literature review for a dissertation or thesis. And again, sometimes based on your purpose, you can prefer having a chronological structure, thematic structure, methodological structure. So it all depends on your purpose. And the 9th one, feedback. When you are dealing with some work inside of some analysis review process, you can sometimes be blind because you are inside of it, you are thinking on it, about it a lot. So please just incorporate feedback from your colleagues, fellows, mentors. That will be very helpful. And also when you submit it, a journal, there will be peer reviewers. So why not having those peer reviewing process informally before submitting, so people can, with a fresh mind, can spot mistakes or inconsistencies in a good way. So especially get somebody who knows the area, sometimes somebody who actually does not know the area, somebody knows. That will be very helpful to construct a good draft. And finally, revise. So it is not an end product. This is a screenshot from my 2021 folder called Dissertation Manuscript. Sometimes after you complete your data analysis, you can change your mind because your data is telling you something. So you should always be open-minded and ready to update, revise some ideas you defended very strongly at the beginning, because this is the empirical and systematic process. If your evidence telling you a certain thing, you should consider updating them. So usually the feedback updating process, it takes a lot of time, but it makes the perfect, even if not perfect, a very strong, robust literature review. So be ready for that one. It is not final one. You will see a lot of final manuscript.
So Merve has done the right thing here and saved multiple drafts, because she made one mistake from my point of view, in that I always save it once, just regular, and then I do a save as -B as a second copy in case I delete the other copy by mistake. So I always have 2 copies of everything. You probably do have multiple copies too, but you all have to, the point here is that she's saving this constantly and can see, she can track her history in terms of this manuscript and how it went from 1,000 size megabytes to 10,000 megabytes or whatever, over the couple of months span there, from January 2021 to March of 2021 to May, June. You can see the growth over time. And that's the growth of her thinking too, probably.
Yeah. So I finished my 10 tips for the literature review. Before moving to the research questions, I will be happy to answer if you have any questions.
Yeah, why don't you stop sharing for a second and see if anyone wants to jump in with a question.
Sure.
Anyone want to comment or add to your own strategy that you use or have been using? Yes, Sabahat.
Oh, I was just applauding Merve for the presentation. Thank you. Yeah, I should think about if I have some additional point to make because it was so comprehensive. One thing that I do, I don't know if it's a good practice. I don't claim it's a good practice, but I have done it for my calls. In cognitive science, I had to do literature review. After each paper, I was taking notes on the important points of that paper and how I can use it in my paper, how it is relevant. And it was kind of useful in the long term. So I could turn back to those little summaries of each paper when I needed, if that makes sense. I don't know if it's like a good practice general, but that's what I did.
Merve, you want
go
to
ahead.
comment, Merve?
Absolutely, Sabahat. It will be very helpful to, as you said, for the long term, even if you design a course in the future and you can reference back to your notes as the readings, as well as, yeah, it will help your organization process just before jumping to the writing part. I think, yeah, that's a very good strategy.
Who else is saying something? Was it Shannon?
Yes, I have a question. So Merve, you talked about, not using direct quotes and obviously not plagiarizing, and the lit review should not be a summary, it's your own thoughts, but it seems like that's all I do is do a really good summary. How do you actually not do that? That's my struggle. I think I've knocked it out of the park that, yeah, look how awesome I am. These are my words. And I get it back. Oh, that's a summary. So I don't know how do you actually summarize? Not summarize, I guess.
I think there is no problem with summarizing as long as you don't overuse it. As a writer, what is expected from us is looking at the research from a meta level and seeing some connections and making a smooth introduction, and then using those summaries to support our own arguments. So at the end, those arguments are just supporting our own ideas. If they are agreeing or disagreeing, the disagreements are so important as well. So it is your stage, and you can play around with those similarities, differences to prepare your reader to do upcoming research questions. So in a nutshell, I think no problem with summaries as long as they are meaningful and supporting your introduction, your purpose.
You could also use mind maps to try and see the macro structure of what you're doing. Some kind of visuals. Merve is good at visualizations, or I should say great at visualizations. And so she uses a lot of them using Miro or whatever kind of tools are out there that she could use. You also could, as in creating a book title or a journal article title or a newsletter title, the first one you come up with is not going to be the one you use. And the same is true of when you're writing your literature review and making the big heady comments. Besides doing the summaries, you could brainstorm 10 things that you might want to say, and then look at that brainstorm list and say, oh, maybe it's just number 4 and number 6 that I really want to say. So I would say, pulling your head aside for a minute, not looking at the screen, and just jotting down what you think are those macro points that are being made here across the literature, across the different people, previous researchers. And then write those key points down without really looking at much else, and then look over them and come and say, well, maybe I'll make this one and this one. I'll forget about the rest. It's really not, there's no substance to them, but you'll see after drafting and redrafting that you'll get a sense of that. Now, in terms of don't quote, no one said don't quote at all. We're just saying limit the quotes to the things that are important and critical or pinnacle or seminal, the seminal ideas of the field. Or the quotes that everyone else is quoting, that the definition of self-directed learning we have, for instance, put in our paper last night. Well, we changed our quote because the reviewer had made a comment about the quote that we chose. Maybe it wasn't a perfect quote. We found a better one and we put it in there to satisfy what the reviewer had commented on. So sometimes they're needed. You'll get a sense over time when you need a quote. It's just be hesitant. Try and make it your own words before you decide to rely on the quote. Other things before she goes to part two. Aisha.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Sabahat, you have a question too.
You can go on because it will be my second round. Please go.
Okay, thanks. Okay, regarding the direct quote and stuff, I remember a statement, these are committee question thing. Yeah, still working on that. Then a statement you made just now that be careful about direct quotes. But what if there are situations where that direct quote is literally saying what you want to say? And this is somebody within this field that's done a study that has the right thing. At least from, remember at least writing a paragraph, something about make a claim, put a supporting, how would I put a citation, then you explain your citation. So I always go with those three things. So now here you are saying, be careful about how much of these citations. Is that not kind of contrary to, so yeah, I'm kind of stressing out right now.
Merve, I have an answer, but I'll let Merve go first.
First of all, Aisha, I totally feel what you mean about you see a quote and you feel like, oh my gosh, this is the excellent way to explain it. If I paraphrase, I'm going to ruin the meaning. So I should have direct quotes. So I also have those feelings in some, especially if you are citing an operational definition, very foundational, or if you are citing from the philosophical or etymological descriptions, it is inescapable. You can cite it, you can quote it. Our purpose is just here to advise, balance it. I know after you start writing, you will find your own technique, your own strategy, how to, where to, when to include those direct quotes or paraphrase their ideas. So you will get those style, your own voice, you will find it.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Your word inescapable was a good word, Merve. Great word. So we all have egos. And when you find a direct quote that matches your research project and you include it in the dissertation, that's a reason to include it, just to, to feel like you hit the right topic and you're on track. The other thing is sometimes your dissertation advisors or your committee members might be questioning why you're studying something, and a direct quote can help convince your committee members, right? It could be studying something a little obscure or a little different. And if you find a couple people who have explored in the field where they've said something that kind of epitomizes what you're attempting to do, yeah, then you can put the quote in, and it might, and in fact, sometimes the quote might go in the proposal, just convince everybody. You might reword it after they pass you on the proposal later on. So there is a jockeying back and forth between including certain quotes and deciding not to include them. But so if you did find the perfect quote, do put it in. Just put it in. Don't hesitate. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Merve, why don't we go to part two after Sabahat's second question? Sabahat?
Yeah, that's a question both for Merve and Dr. Bonk.
Yeah.
So it's my first years of my PhD. I used to have literature from older work, and I received criticism both from professors and from when I submitted the AERA, you quote newer work. These works are old. So lately my rule of thumb is, I don't know, do literature review of the last 10 years or something. I do more recent work I do review of more recent work. So my question is it bad to use old works in our work? Yeah, that's my question. What do you think about including older work in your work? Is it bad? Does it raise your eyebrows while somebody does that?
Merve, I'll let you answer it first again.
This is an excellent question, Sabahat, and one of the very controversial ideas and discussions in the field. My answer is it depends. It depends on your topic. I mean, if you are working on an AI related something, and if your purpose to show, to present the empirical studies, how it works in a different setting. So the current versions, if I am the reviewer, I will look for the most current findings or descriptions. But if you are writing a theoretical piece, for instance, again, I'm going to give examples from my dissertation. It was about concepts, how we can understand technology and the concepts appearing in the instructional system design field. So I had to go back to Deleuze and Guattari, their works in 1990s, and they were actually, their ideas were my theoretical camp. So I should cite the primary sources. I mean, I should go back to their books and then read by myself. Usually we recommend, maybe I forget in my tips, avoid using secondary resources. If it is available, go to the first primary resources. So in conclusion, Sabahat, it depends on your research questions and theoretical framework.
So I'm going to add to that. Yesterday, I got another paper back with one of my grad students in a language ed journal. And one of the reviewers critiqued us having John Flavel, his research on metacognition and self-regulated learning from 1976, and another citation from 1986. Well, John Flavel was one of the primary or initial researchers looking at metacognition and looking at self-regulated learning at the University of Minnesota. And not only that, John Flavel was my advisor's advisor. So, I thought for sure it's okay to put that in for a reference in that, he influenced me indirectly as his grandson, I guess you would say. But, I have a huge problem, Sabahat, with reviewers and with professors or advisors who claim everything has to be current, and grad students who look at a syllabus and say, why is this article from 2017? I only want to read 2022 stuff. History is extremely important in the field of education. IST, however, things come in and out as fads. But I think in the area of, in this one case, educational psychology, humans learn, and the way they process and store and retrieve information was the same in 1976 as it is today. It might be a little faster, it might be with more storage devices, but the principles of metacognition will still hold, and so I really have a problem with the cultural issues of today, of the whole society wanting everything to be today or yesterday, otherwise it's no longer important. So stick to your guns, Sabahat, cite the historical pieces as much as you can. At the same time, try to stay in tune and in touch with how things are changing, and I try and have a balance between the things in my research articles that are 20, 21, and 22, the last couple of years, and those things that might be, historically grounded 20 years ago or 30 years ago. In fact, I wrote an article once on our Wikibook project. I think the title was Looking Back 20 Years Ago to Today. So there was a seminal piece written 20 years before that really impacted our research today. And I tried to connect it through the title of Looking Back 20 Years to Today. So there might be ways to make those connections for your reader, and to make it, even in the segues, even in the way the transitions between sentences, you can say, in terms of the history of this field, Flavel in 1976 indicated this. 20 years later, someone else said that. And that way, people realize you're in step or in tune with not only the history, but how it's changed. So I would try to appease the reader that way, so that you're not just citing older work, you're also citing new trends or current research and so forth. But definitely don't give up. You should be, the way I was trained, if you didn't cite the old history, it was rejected. Now, in 2022, it's like if you do cite the history, you get rejected. Society's a little weird right now, I will say. So does that help?
Yeah, both answers up. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so Merve, why don't you go through the other 10 tips for us?
Now let's talk a little bit about what is worth asking and why. The first step to ask a good question is actually the first part of this presentation, which is performing a systematic literature review. Sometimes you can do your own literature review to find those gaps, initial observations. If you have limited time and resources, looking at the systematic literature reviews conducted by other scholars are also a very good way, because people at the end of their papers recommending some future directions, they are so important actually, paying attention to what they are recommending. So they might be a good way to start, especially in these diagrams. After searching, you have to construct a statement of problem. And this is the general purpose of the second part, is how we can construct that problem. The second tip is, especially in the instructional technology field, we are in some way, we have some tools and technologies included in our research design. I would like to tell an example here. For my postdoc, one of the projects I was working was how we can understand students and faculty movement in the active learning classrooms. And we decided to use a heat map to understand the most highly densely used locations or furniture and technologies. But before asking my questions, I wasn't very familiar with what is happening with heat map technology, what kind of cameras are doing that, what are the brands. So I needed to, first of all, before shaping my question, search for the camera brands and features and ask to the university's technology center engineers to get some ideas, some recommendations. So knowing the trends and technologies in your research field is another tip to build a more robust research question. The third one, actually, I cited Farago et al.'s paper about finer criteria. Those feasibility, being interesting, novel, ethical, relevant, these 5 features are so important to write good research, fantastic research questions. First of all, you should think about your available resources. What kind of subjects or people you can access, what kind of technical tools you need. Do you have money for that? Or is it manageable? How many semesters do you have to complete that research? Kind of technical feasibility related questions should be answered in the first step. Second, it should be interesting. So it is maybe related with the third one, novelty. Is it confirming, refuting, or extending something? So if it is telling something new, it will be at the same time interesting. Consider about those two variables as well. And the next one, ethical. At the end, to start your research, you have to get first an IRB approval and think about potential questions the IRB committee will ask you, how you are going to answer them, what kind of sampling you are going to do, what kind of populations you will work. So ethical principles are so important to think about it. Again, I would like to share an example. In that before the heat map study, we use a regular traditional camera to record student interactions in a class during the one semester. So one of the questions asked by the IRB committee, how are you going to address students who don't want to be recorded during a classroom? So it was a challenging question, and we came up with a blurring feature. We learned how to blur people's faces. So in one section, there was a student who don't want to be recorded, even if it is anonymous, she still didn't want to be included, and we came up with that solution. So if we couldn't find the blurring function, I think we were willing to change our research questions. So you should keep that in your mind as well. And finally, relevancy. Is it a science? Are you going to produce a scientific knowledge? I mean, it shouldn't be expected to be an assessment or evaluation kind of knowledge. It should be some generalizable, reproducible knowledge, even if it is a qualitative study. You should be systematic, your steps should be clear and replicable. And at the end of your research, do you have anything to tell for the other people? I mean, what will be your future research recommendations? Although these kind of things are addressed at the end, it will be a good strategy to think about them from the beginning during the research questions. So finer model is one of the helpful model I used during my dissertation proposal writing process. The next one, try to have some...
Merve, I'll just point out that was excellent. Just another excellent slide. Thank you, Merve.
Sure,
I look at this and I say, if I teach dissertation prep next semester, which I think I am, I'm going to have to invite you back just so you can present this slide again for my students. You did a great job with that. You can go ahead. Tip number 8.
Try to develop primary and secondary objectives. And I took a screenshot of this table from Periour's article. So at the end, you can start very broad purpose. It shouldn't have any jargon, any terminology. In this example, they said, why do training teachers go about assessing pupils in the way that they do? So very broad question, initial motivation, and try to generate new questions from each maybe word. Try to find something to expand what might be the potential other questions. It might be, why do they understand by assessment? What are they influenced by? So when you try to generate more derivatives of one sentence, you will have a very large pool, and at the end, critique them, which one are better applicable. Again, go back to your previous finer model and try to choose which one might be more feasible, interesting, novel, and at the end, again, make them another less broad question type. So it will help you actually during your defense or before the defense for the proposal process. Those potential questions might be asked by your reviewers. So you are just thinking like them, and what will be the other ways to understand or to answer those questions. So, I mean, you are going to be your own peer reviewer to generate more ideas, more potential questions in the form of primary and secondary objectives. And the 9th one, categorize your question types. This is the screenshot from my dissertation. If you categorize your question types, it will help you to better expect what kind of tools, what kind of research design I'm going to use. For instance, in my case, I used 5 different question types. I had a definitional question, descriptive question, interpretive, critical, and deconstructive. So for somebody, a reviewer who sees a descriptive question, I mean, it can tell what kind of research design I'm going to use, what kind of tools I might utilize. So it will help for the next steps of the chain, the research design, the procedures part, to answer and to develop tools specific to each categories.
Merve, you didn't go back. You didn't tell him what your dissertation title was, or, you know, in a brief, I wanted to go into your whole dissertation, but just briefly, what was your, because they might understand the questions, because her dissertation was not a typical dissertation.
In my dissertation, my broad purpose was how people understand technology. It was very broad. And then I made it a little bit narrower by changing people to educational technology scholars, and then in the educational technology design field. And then I did a document analysis, how people in their written discourse defined and studied some concepts used interchangeably sometimes, like e-learning, distance learning, online learning, web-based learning, like in the
virtual learning.
Yes, these 9 concepts, how they have been constructed and deconstructed throughout the history from 1985 to 1980, like almost 3 decades in Turkish context. So I did a document analysis and I had to validate my findings with some interviews. I used a descriptive, interpretive, qualitative research design, and I used some as an analysis technique, critical discourse analysis. So since I built my research on a post-phenomenological paradigm, asking questions, critical ones, can we criticize governmental initiatives, or can we build a ontology in the field, because people are just using concepts, but there should be a relation. Why somebody is using e-learning but not online learning? Is there something happened in the history and they started using in a specific way? So for this reason, I analyzed the patterns, trends, and look at the relations. It is under review, one part, and other part is still in preparation. So yeah, Dr. Bonk, go ahead.
So she looked at dissertations in Turkey over, was it 40 or 50 year time span?
30
years, 30 some years, 30 plus years, that we're using the words distance learning or virtual learning or online learning or, something else. And then, so she had to wrap her head around all these dissertations. How many total did you have there in the study? 190 or
191 dissertations,
yeah,
and 105 definitions.
a lot of work she did. That's why you saw the different subheads going, oh my God. That's why you see all the saving, all the different versions of your dissertation.
Can I move to the next?
Yeah, move to number 10, yeah.
And finally, seek for feedback, again, input from mentors, colleagues, and collaborators. But here, this is so important. Please ask the questions or ideas or opinions of people you trust, you respect, you follow their studies. Because I'm going to share a very short anecdote here. When I was working on the proposal process, I submitted my dissertation to ACT, I think 2019 in Las Vegas, and it was a roundtable session. Somebody came to my presentation, listened to it, and at the end, he said, you know what, this is a waste of time and resource. I'm going to tell you, all of them are same. No need to make a research. So I was so surprised how somebody who has, apparently he didn't have an expertise in this field, just listening and trying to discourage me not to not to continue with this study. So please just take into consideration of the advices of people you respect and you rely, you trust. Otherwise, it can be a challenge, the feedback. The purpose is to improve it, not to distract or change your design entirely. So it will be my last tip. These are some of the selected references, and thank you so much for listening.
So I want to emphasize that last point. There's a lot of no people out there, and you can stop sharing, I guess, at this point. I think Dr. Hitchcock has joined us in here. We're going to take a little break here, John. So for 5 minutes, then we'll come back to you after the Q&A here. So we'll start with you in about 10 minutes or so, if that's okay.
That sounds great. I'll just come back in 10.
Yeah. Why don't you come back at 7:15? How's that sound?
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thanks, John.
Okay, bye-bye all.
But so one thing you have to watch out for are the no people out there. And there are plenty of no people. At Wisconsin, when I was graduating, they called the chair Dr. No. Like Dr. No, the movie or the weekly series from the UK. He would say no to everything. And there are people who will look at your dissertation proposal or look at your research projects after a dissertation and just say it's junk, it's trash, and they're out to criticize everybody and everything. Don't fill your life up with those people. Don't surround yourself with those people. Be aware of those people. And at times you might sit at a pub at the end of a conference with one or two such people and try and convince them of your point of view, but don't do that a lot. But there are times which you might want to have a challenging discussion for one of those people, but typically you want to hang out with people who are supportive, encouraging, who also offer advice along the way to improve what you're working on. And always we should be looking at improving and growing and incremental change. Sometimes over time is transformative. You just typically don't recognize when the transformation is happening. It's always incremental. When the pandemic hit, for many, it was a transformative change for many of us. But yeah, so Merve had to deal with that AERA negative kind of feedbacks. Or was it AERA or was it ACT?
ACT.
ACT, okay, yeah. So, and we did present, we presented a different one at AERA a couple of years back. But yeah, so other comments or questions for Merve?
I have just a comment.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? That's
Yeah.
because my internet is not stable. So first of all, thank you. Yeah, that is really great presentation. It's very practical and useful for students, especially for me, to working on dissertation. Just I think that I already knew some of them, right? But I never tried to really focus on that one. So that was really great. And then that one is off questions. I really like your, graphics. So did you make it or where did you get it? So great, right? So every time.
I designed some of them in Miro, and
Oh.
the others are from the gallery of Adobe. IU provides free
Wow.
graphic access to all IU students and stuff. They are from Adobe's gallery.
Oh, that sounds great. Maybe I can use that for my dissertation presentation document. That's great. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think we'll have to bring Merve back. I think that session will cost $25 a piece.
That's the semester. Definitely, that's the semester. You should come back, okay?
Go ahead, Merve.
Question. The name is Adobe Stock Gallery. If you search for IU Adobe Stock Gallery with your IU account, you can access to all free images.
We have two questions in the Jamboard. Shannon's got one. Did you already ask these?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe second one?
Does anyone have a remaining question? Comment? Was this valuable or useful for you all? Kim, what do you think? You're quiet tonight.
Hey, Merve.
Thank you.
So no, I'm just standing here. I had to get away from my desk. I had a really similar thing happen when I was doing my master's research, because where I was studying was not something that a lot of folks in my department even studied at that point. So there were some pretty critical people in a lot of the presentations I went to, and my advisor told me, just don't even listen to it. It's not even worth it. If we're getting funded, it obviously is of some importance. And they're afraid and upset at your beauty and skill, is what he always used to say. And then he would say the three letters that I've always used with my students, TUF, tough. Okay, so tough that you have to listen to this, tough that you have to put up with it, but at this point now, tough that I have to put up with your students now. But no, I thought this was great. And I honestly, I really liked personally the part about not putting in too many quotations and really letting your own voice through. I really need to focus on that as I start writing. So I don't have any questions because actually Sume took the question that I had because I love the design of your slides and where you got your graphics. So, but thank you very much for all of this.
Thank you. I really enjoyed presenting and listening to your experiences as well. And good luck, wishing you good luck with the proposal and defense.
We can take one, maybe two more questions, and then we got to take a break. Megan, you put your camera on. Did you want to jump in here?
Oh, I did? No, oh wait, actually, I completely forgot. I had put a question in the Jamboard like way at the beginning, and I forgot about it. When you're doing this, you know, what type of literature review do you recommend? Or, you know, like, do you recommend doing a systematic one, or do you recommend doing a thematic one, or does it really depend on the dissertation?
In the written literature, before actually yesterday while preparing this presentation, I was hesitant if I should include the types of literature reviews. I mean, for a dissertation, it is more like a synthesis, having the purpose, finding the studies. I mean, it shouldn't have to be systematic. You don't have to clearly explain your keyword search as a method, because it is per se a different paper, the systematic literature reviews. But for a dissertation, it doesn't have to belong to any of those categories. I think there are 11 types of literature review types. So dissertation is a little bit more unique, and again, based on the institution, it might change. But for IU, we use the conventional structure, which is introduction, your claim, the empirical, theoretical, methodological background, and you are free who to choose, who to exclude. But in a systematic one, you cannot exclude someone because you don't want to include or something. So they are very different type of papers. I think go with conventional for a dissertation. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. That was great. That was really helpful. Thanks.
So Ben is to thank tonight for holding class. I put mistakenly 7 o'clock. I meant to say 6 o'clock, and Ben corrected me. Thank you, Ben. I want to get you on camera here. You want to make the final comment for tonight before Merve goes?
Nothing real new to add, just thank you very much. This was very helpful. My only thing to add, it might just be me, but this was a very clear, concrete explanation of some abstract ideas. I might have benefited from this earlier in the program. So I guess my only input is just keep coming back. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, both this week and last week have been good for R795. This semester before, or the year, if you've taken it a year ago, I think, you know, they will, but given that they probably weren't in R690, it gives me something to put into R795 that's of value for everyone, and you know, it gives a little core and meaning besides just writing your proposal. You're in part, I'm looking at this class at helping you gain research skills, helping you gain writing skills, and helping you get your proposals written. I mean, I've got 3 or 4 goals, and also qualifying exams. So for me, there's many things that I want to do with, you know, and provide within this class. And so Ashot, I've not forgotten about survey tools, and I'll ask Merve, we can do one of 2 things. Merve, if you could share your book chapter on survey tools with me, and I can share it with the class so they can learn about survey tools that are out there.
Sure, and I will send you.
What did you have anything else prepared about survey tools, or?
I just have my manuscript. I haven't prepared any presentation, but we can share with the class.
Yeah, let's do that for now. And if you don't understand things, Ashot, after the reading her chapter about different survey tools. Her email is, we could put her email in the chat window now, and I could share it with you later. Merve can put that in there now, and I think that would be great. I used to do talks on survey tools myself all around the world, training people how to do online surveys about 20 some years ago. But they're now gone. I used to do spreadsheets a long time ago. Those skills are gone too. Anyways, I want to thank Merve. We give her a big round of applause. And she's been in 2 classes over the past 2 nights. One to help someone in Idaho last night, and here in Indiana. And tomorrow night be Iowa, and then some other I words. But
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
You did great. You did great. And we'll see you in the research team meeting tomorrow. I will stop the recording. Let's see if I'm going to stop the recording now to the